and we'll begin our presentation today. So I'm Kevin. We have Laverne and Dan with us. I have, maybe about 10 years ago or so, 9 or 10 years ago, I was asked to join the Sprucelawn board. There has been a St. Jacob's ministerial connection on that board since the beginning. As part of that Sprucelawn connection of the three churches that were all involved, the three churches in the village, St. Jacob's Mennonite, St. James Lutheran, and Calvary United, that were all involved at the beginning in imagining and bringing this project to reality, whatever that was, Laverne, 30 plus years ago. 40, yeah, okay. It's a long history and a very exciting one in the village of St. Jacob's, providing low-income, affordable housing is the language that we've used, affordable housing for seniors in the village of St. Jacob's. I joined the board about 10 years ago, and at that point, my very first meeting was a visioning kind of day-long workshop. And it was a great introduction for me to what's going on at Sprucelawn and what the history was there. It was also the place where the board began to develop a vision for expanding the property at Sprucelawn and the facilities, and creating more apartments and units for folks to live in the village. That was 10 years ago, and here we are. It's 10 years since, and this project is now just in the process of actually getting work done on a site for this. So that is very exciting, but it has been a very long road to get here. So encompassing the whole of my sort of 10-year connection with Sprucelawn. So we have both Laverne and Dan here to share a little bit about that story. Laverne has been the chair of the Sprucelawn board for many, many years. And Dan Dreger has been connected more recently as Sprucelawn and Menno Homes, now Beyond Housing, have come together. And they'll share a little bit more about how that happened and what that means for Sprucelawn moving forward. And we'll hear about this exciting expansion project that's in the works right now. So I think that's probably all that I need to say by way of introduction. Many of you know Dan and Laverne well, so I'll give it to them and they'll share with us the Sprucelawn story.
Thank you, Kevin. I think what we'll do here is I will start with some of the history and take us to the point of where we start construction, and Dan will take it from there and introduce more about Beyond Housing and the project and so forth. He's got pictures. I don't have pictures of the history, but I can talk about the history. So a little bit of the history of Sprucelawn. In the early 80s, a group of people from the three St. Jacob's churches, as Kevin mentioned, saw a need for some affordable seniors housing in St. Jacob's. And I'm not sure who all was on the original committee, but I know Milo Schatz, Gene Hackburn, Ernie and Honor Hackburn, Richard Yorty, Menno Martin, and a bunch of other people. And I got a note from Marcy just recently that her grandmother said that Gene Hackburn insisted that the building have an elevator when it's built. So that's a little tidbit from the beginning. At that time, Ella and I were heavily involved with the guest house and had opened only about a year or so before. And I remember Tom Yutzi, who worked for Milo Schatz at the time, coming over and asking if they could buy a wedge of land by the mill race from the guest house for a seniors home project. And it didn't affect the operation of the guest house. So the opportunity to recoup a little bit of money on our brand new guest house operation was a good thing. I don't remember what was paid for it. I don't think it was a lot, but because the land was almost like a worthless sliver of land back there. So the property was put together along mill race with some guest house property, the railway property, the township wedge of land in the current driveway, which ironically, Tom then said that we would never need. I'll talk to you about that a bit later. A 30-unit apartment building was built by ProTrend Construction, John Sheetal, and Howie Weidman was a site super. The new building that is being built now is done by Vandel, which was started by John Sheetal and Rich Stavanis. And Howie Weidman is the first cousin of Elroy and Cliff Weidman. So it was built and it was complete with an elevator. This is a CMHC rent geared to income program where 20% of the units, or 6 of the 30, were subsidized, and the rents were to be kept at 80% or less of market. The funding came through Canada Mortgage and Housing, There was a 35-year mortgage and grants, and I'm not sure exactly where all the money came to build in the first place, but it was built. And it's been successfully operated by a board of volunteers from the 3 churches. The rents have been kept at 80% of the market. Up to 6 units have rent subsidized, and all of that is overseen and controlled by the region. So that was the beginning. And I've been on the board since 2003, first on the property committee and now chair for, I'm not sure, 12 or 14 years. And when we looked at expansion, I promised to stay on the board until occupancy of the new building, which I naively thought might have happened a number of years ago. In 2012, as Kevin mentioned, our board started looking at possibilities going forward. We had a 35-year mortgage, which would soon be paid off. And so what's next? Do we just carry on? Can we grow? We did a feasibility study, which is when Kevin came on board. We had community input. We met with all the different seniors accommodation places in St. Jacobs. We talked to business people in St. Jacobs, and everyone supported the need for more affordable housing, seniors housing. And so we hired Brian Chance to look at expansion options. And Brian's been a helpful leader all the way along from the beginning 10 years ago. We looked at going up, adding 1 or 2 more floors. That was not feasible. We looked at the property behind the guest house between there and the railway, about an acre, but the owner of the guest house at the time didn't want to sell. Brian looked at doing a 3-story, 10-unit little building in the front at some point, and that was not viable either. So then he proposed an addition on the existing parking lot on the Millrace side. And that looked like a very promising kind of a thing. We needed to buy the Carpenter house next door for a new entrance and parking lot. The parking lot and the driveway would come in off just over a bit further in front of the Carpenter house. We talked to the owners at the time, and they weren't ready to sell, but they liked the plan and the ideas. So the next few years, we kept in touch with them. And in 2016, got a call, we're ready to sell. And so we were able to negotiate buying the property. We weren't ready to build, but we thought we had the property in hand and go from there. The day before the Carpenter house was to close, I got a call at home at 5:30 from Scotiabank. We had all our financing arranged with Scotiabank. We had dealt with them since day one. And that afternoon, a senior Scotiabank VP in Toronto had decided that they would no longer fund not-for-profits. Well, now what? We didn't have any money to close the deal in a couple of days. We had an emergency meeting with our executive of the board, called Tom Yutzi, our lawyer, and he said, let's get a 30-day extension on closing. And we did that. So we had to start over again with trying to get financing. I had been occasionally communicating with Rand Dreger at that time, and I called him and asked him, where does Mena Homes get their financing? And he said they worked with Kindred. So I called Kindred, and Jim Berzina, our treasurer, and I met with Brian Wagler of Kindred the following week at Sprucelawn. We did a tour and explained what we needed. And within 2 hours, Brian offered us what we needed. We had all the legal paperwork drawn up. And then when we were signing the papers, Brian offered more. He said, let's make the number higher in case you need more. Wes continued to operate out of a Sprucelawn owned Carpenter house until January 31st of this year. We owned it, but he operated out of it, and then he vacated at the end of January. When we bought the property, we looked at amalgamating the 2 properties into one, Sprucelawn and the Carpenter house next door. And then we learned that this small wedge of property on our driveway that was still owned by the township as surplus land, and maybe should have been taken care of that 40 years ago. The township said they needed to do a $3,000 appraisal of the small wedge of property, which we paid for to get 3 appraisers to come in. And I remember at that time, Mark Bauman, who was a counselor, asked, why do we do the appraisal when the property is not worth more than that? Anyways, after a couple of months of deliberation, they said we could buy the land for $2. But we had to do a site condition study, which would cost us $18,000. We never did find out what the appraiser value was. So the site conditions meant a lot of studies. It ended up being that we had to remove some of the railway land. There was contaminated soil. There was backfilling and repaving and resodding in the area where the new building was going to be built, which we are going to be digging up right now. And the total cost of the site remediation work was about $150,000. And when they were doing it, I asked the inspector what they were finding. And she said, well, there's some cinders here at the railway track. Anyways, that was one of the things we encountered along the way. We then amalgamated all three properties, which is Sprucelawn, the Carpenter House, and the little wedge of land. And then we had to do a site condition report again around the building. And they found salt under the 35-year-old asphalt, believe it or not. We had to apply for a zone change in order to build the addition, and we were granted the zone change with two holding provisions. One, the salt that contaminated the soils had to be remediated. We were able to leave that until excavating for the new building, but everything will have to be tested as we go. And two, there was water draining into the mill race from the existing north roof and the parking lot, and that's been draining into the mill race since the beginning. And because the mill race header needs to be replaced because it's not in good shape, we can't run any more water into the mill race before that's done. The GRC has no budget or immediate interest in doing it, and it would take a number of years before that would come into place. So after looking at all the options, we decided to do our own storm drain on Front Street in the fall of 2020. You probably have seen that. And that cost us another $190,000. Brian led us through many, many studies, site condition issues, heritage issues with the Carpenter House, et cetera, over the next few years. Kindred was very supportive with financing along the way. Brian continued to work on designs and plans for a 28 unit addition. We worked with Judith Binder from CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing, on getting funding from the government. We got some seed funding, which is funding to do the initial plans for projects. We worked with Jeff Shoemaker from the region. He's the housing director. Many phone calls. Both of them met with our board several times. Our board was into this project, and we are not going to stop now. With the purchase of the Carpenter House property and the many studies, site conditions, storm drain, we were over $1.5 million, and we didn't know if we can build yet. And Brian asked a few times if we really wanted to continue. What happens if it all falls apart? Well, we could remortgage our paid off existing building. We could sell the Carpenter House, other options, but we were determined to see it through. About 5 or 6 years ago, before the foundry project happened in Elmira, Dan called me and asked if part of his board could meet with part of our board to talk about how we operate at Sprucelawn. And we had a very good sharing meeting and talked about our operations, about Meadow Homes' projected Elmira project, and our hopes for expansion at Sprucelawn. Dan and I kept in touch with a coffee every few months, sharing how each of our projects were going. The foundry and Sprucelawn, he was getting ahead a lot quicker than we ever were. And then at our meetings, we started talking a bit about what would happen if Sprucelawn merged with Meadow Homes. How would that look? What would it mean? What advantages or disadvantages? And at Sprucelawn, the board had never considered that kind of an idea. Eventually, Dan met with our executive and then with our board several times, and where we explored further what merging might mean. Over time and lots of discussion, we all came to the conclusion that merging would be very good. Sprucelawn brings an established 40-year successful, paid for 30-unit rent geared to income affordable housing apartment complex to the table, with a waiting list of over 100, plus the region's waiting list, which is probably more than that. And that set of plans, just to let me show you. There's 81 pages of drawings. There's 450 pages of specifications. It's all digital, of course. But just to show you that Brian has put an awful lot of time and effort into putting this whole thing together. So we had a building permit ready set of plans, as I showed you, and studies to add to and support the Meadow Homes' successful affordable housing program. So last spring, or winter, I guess, a memo of understanding was approved by both boards. In April, Sprucelawn and Meadow Homes responded jointly to an RFP for funding from the region. And Dan has really taken this project on and handled the funding application extremely well. The application was done very professionally. And our board had taken things as far as we could do with our abilities, and Dan took it from there. We were approved for a $2.7 million grant plus development charges forgiveness of $405,000. And then since then, the government, or the township, I'm sorry, also approved their development charges forgiveness of 192,000. So the merger took place last November 30th, and the transition was complete by February the 1st of this year. Vandel Construction has been hired to build the addition. We've been very happy with the building that we have, and we've kept it well maintained. Every time someone moves out in the last 8 or 10 years, we've been refurbishing the units. Vandel started the work a couple of weeks ago with the removal of the carpenter house, and completion and occupancy is anticipated in the summer of 2023. In December last year, we had a meeting with our existing Sprucelawn tenants at the Calvary United Church. They were all registered, spaced, masked, vaccinated. We had a good attendance. And our board wanted the tenants to know what is happening and how it will affect their lives over the next year or year and a half. I informed the tenants that we are now merged with Menno Homes, which is Beyond Housing now. Introduced Dan, who talked about Menno Homes, and Brian Shantz and Justin Champagne, his architect, went over the plans with 2 large wall screens in the auditorium. Then Vandel did a presentation. Jeff Almond, who was one of the partners there, and Jessica Koulis, who is our project supervisor, talked a bit about the history of some of their similar projects. And Jessica went through the phasing on the screen, how the 16 or 18 phases will be done with diagrams and how it will be built, where the tenants will park, how they will communicate. It was a very good presentation. The tenants were assured that Sprucelawn will still be Sprucelawn. There were lots of good questions after the presentations. I think it was a positive, informative meeting. So our Sprucelawn board, which is now a Sprucelawn committee of Beyond Housing, is very pleased to be part of Beyond Housing, and our committee will continue on until the building is complete and occupied next summer. Dan's been great and wonderful to work with and negotiate with and supported. In fact, he's been our savior, really. Our board took the project as far as we knew how to do it. And Dan's knowledge, his leadership with the joint submission to the RFP for the region, his relationship with CMHC, and knowing what the requirements are, working with the township, and his credibility with all these organizations is amazing. And Brian Shantz has been the same. He's led us through a number of phases and so forth, and all the studies that we had to do. So we've had a couple of people that have been very, very instrumental in helping us get to where we are. So we know that the Sprucelawn legacy of successfully providing affordable housing for the last 40 years in St. Jacobs and Woolwich will now successfully carry on. And we're very grateful to the village of St. Jacobs and the 3 churches for their support. And now we will carry on that legacy. So Dan, it's your turn, I think, to carry on from here.
Okay, well, thanks, Laverne, for a wonderful introduction. I feel we're getting into the hockey playoffs now, so I feel very much like this is like a hockey team. And you and the board of Sprucelawn and Brian Shantz and his team have done all the hard work going through all the defensemen and doing, getting slammed up against the boards and everything. And I'm just the guy who doesn't know how to hold a stick very well standing in front of the net. And you're going to hit it off my stick and go into the net. And I get the goal, right? So we would not have been able to do this without all the hard work and perseverance that the board of Sprucelawn and everyone involved has had over the last number of years. I mean, I think the amalgamation of the 2 organizations makes a lot of sense, to go forward, but certainly the work that you've done to stick with it to this stage has been fantastic, because we've been off doing some other things at the same time. So it's all good. And I don't assume that everyone knows a lot about Menno Homes. So I do have a bit of a PowerPoint I'm going to share just to give people a bit of a history lesson, I guess. In Menno Homes, I'm going to share some of the drawings and renderings of the new building, and then at the end I'll top it off with a little bit of what comes next for us as well. So always the tricky part here. I will share my screen and start the slideshow from the beginning, and I'm going to get a thumbs up from Kevin to let me know that everything's working. So Sprucelawn, Menno Homes. And it's wonderful that you're starting to refer to us as Beyond Housing, which is our new name, although we are not yet. We haven't yet officially made that happen, partially because we have a lot of arrangements, contracts being signed with CMHC and with the region. And if you change your name in the middle of all those, the only thing that happens is everything takes longer and the lawyers get richer. So we're going to delay that as long as we can. But I do want to go through, talk a wee bit about who we are as an organization, and what we have in common with Sprucelawn. And for those of you who might not be familiar with Mental Homes like Sprucelawn, we provide affordable housing in Waterloo Region. And this is a graphic that CMHC uses to identify where different types of housing are. It's what they call the housing continuum. And you can see both Mental Homes and Sprucelawn provide affordable housing for people who can live independently, but might need a little bit of help on the financial side of things. So that's the work that we do. We've been doing it since 2001, and Sprucelawn's been doing it for a lot longer than that. So throughout Waterloo Region, with the amalgamation with Sprucelawn this past year, a year ago, we did the same sort of thing with Waterloo Mennonite Homes in Waterloo. We built a 48-unit apartment building in Kitchener last year, and also did a renovation of a house that we got through the region of Waterloo on Mill Street. So all told, we have 230 households in Waterloo Region that call our housing their home. We own all of them except the one there that's right next to your church, where we have partnered with St. Jacob's Mennonite for since 2017, I guess. So almost 5 years now this fall, with the Syrian refugee family that's living in there as well. So that's our kind of our scope across the region. Specifically in Woolwich Township, with the amalgamation with Sprucelawn, we have 63 homes in Woolwich. So a number of semis and duplexes in Elmira, as well as the Foundry, the apartment building that was built back in 2017. So with Sprucelawn, as Laverne shared, it was constructed in 1985 and has 28 one-bedroom units and two-bedroom units, and the current rents are very affordable according to what people are asking for rents now. So $718 for the one bedrooms and $887. These are rough numbers from the fall. I'm not sure if they changed in January at all or not, but it's kind of tucked away back in there. Although those trees that you can see on the left of this picture, they're not there any longer. And this is what it's going to look like when that addition actually gets completed. So to the left is the existing building with 30 units, and the new addition that Brian Chaunce's team has been working on so hard, and that Laverne and the Sprucelawn board has been envisioning for the last number of years, 28-unit addition there, right along the mill race. And so in the previous picture where the parking lot was, that's where this new building is going. And so where the house had been up until a week ago, that's going to be turned over into parking. So the bottom right-hand corner there is the block there that shows the semi-detached house that is currently on site. And so we're working pretty hard to squeeze it onto a very, very tight site. Yeah, we're making the best use of all the space that's available. I guess that's probably the best way to put it. So when you do see it, they put a lot of work into creating a building that will be attractive from the road, that people will feel proud to take guests and visitors into, and it also matches the architectural style of the existing building as well. So this will be facing out onto the street. Right at the front there, you can see actually there's a bit of an outdoor sitting area with some benches, and then you know, a nice naturalized area there as well. So 2 stories kind of on the parking lot side, and on the back side of it will be 3 stories of apartments going out to the mill race. But the portion on the left, under that 2-story portion, there's also some other rooms and whatnot. I'll show you that as well. The entrance will get switched around a little bit, but be much more accessible, much more inviting, and also have some open space up at the top there as well that you can see for people to go out and maybe catch some fresh air without being in direct sunlight, and maybe not having to go right out into the parking lot area as well. And then the back side, this is along the mill race. This rendering was taken on after a rainy day. You can see the water's quite high. So it's not going to be quite like this. You can only do so much with graphics, but on the back side of it there, you can see how it abuts against the existing brick building. And again, those units on the back are going to be quite lovely. They'll have some balconies or some walkout patio areas there, and just be a really, really nice opportunity for people who have moderate and low incomes to also enjoy some of what nature has to provide. I'm not going to get too deep into the details of the drawings because you can't see a lot here other than at the top of this drawing is where the apartments are. And the bottom portion, that big yellow area on the right-hand side, that's a community room. In the middle is a kitchenette area, a bit of an amenity room, some washroom space, and off to the left, some lockers. So the top portion of it that extends out onto the mill race, and there are some apartment buildings there, and then the bottom portion which has the amenity room. And we really think it's important, and this wasn't something that Menlo Homes did, it was something that the Sprucelawn board decided, but it's perfectly in alignment with how we would normally do things, and that's to provide accessible space and space for community events or for folks to host their family if they've downsized and don't have room for a family event any longer. That space is available for them as well. So very important to keep people connected to their family and also for social events inside the building. The second floor and the third floor are pretty well identical. Once again, a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. On the left, you can see that there is a transition over where it connects up to the current building. And the new building will actually also have an elevator. So just to make sure that if 1 elevator is not enough, then maybe 2 is going to be better. So people don't have to go too far to get an elevator. And the beauty of that is that if there ever actually has to be maintenance on an elevator, you aren't stranding people on an upper floor without a way to access the lower floors. They're not going to be very, very large apartments, but frankly, this is right in line with what all those tall condos that are being built in downtown Kitchener and Waterloo have. There's units going into those units that are under 500 square feet. So this is right in line with what the market is building. And we have here in the 1 bedroom units, a mix of barrier free, which has turning radius. They all have turning radiuses, but the barrier free has extra space in terms of the washroom, a roll-in shower, and those sorts of things, so that folks that need that extra level of flexibility in their living space can have access to it in this building as well. An open concept design, which again just makes the space feel bigger. We really try not to get fixated so much on square footage as opposed to what does it feel like when I walk into the space. And a few feet here and there, most people won't notice that. The 557 that you see here is actually related to a couple of the units at the end where it abuts with the new building. And because of a funny angle, they ended up being slightly smaller. But my guess is when people walk into either of those, they're not really going to notice the difference. And there are a number of 2 bedroom units as well. So they're larger, obviously, with the 2 bedrooms. And there's a nice little kind of a 3D idea of what that would be like as well. So, for a couple either that wants to maybe use 1 room as an office area, or maybe there's something health-wise that it just makes more sense for separate bedrooms. Well, this is able to accommodate that as well. So there's going to be 8 2-bedroom units in the apartment building, a couple on each floor. So I'm going to try and preempt some of your questions by sharing some of the details as well. So of the 21 bedroom units, 8 of those will be set to what they call the ODSP, the Ontario Disability Support Program shelter allowance, which in 2021 was $497. These are deeply affordable rental units. And this comes out of our agreement with the Region of Waterloo for the money that they're contributing to the project. We have to make a commitment in terms of rents, and that means that 8 of these will be coming off the Region of Waterloo's waiting list. And so if you know somebody who is on the waiting list at the region for affordable housing, it might not be a bad idea to have them update their application to identify Sprucelawn as a location that they want to live in, because we are required to take the tenants for these lowest rent units off of the Region of Waterloo's waiting list. The balance will have rents set, and these are rough numbers at this point. It'll change a little bit as the CMHC median market rent numbers change, but right now we're estimating those at $809. The average rent, according to CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, for a 1-bedroom unit last year was $1,131. But the actual current median rent, and this is if you go to one of the rental online portals and try to rent apartments throughout Kitchener-Waterloo, it's actually $1,550 a month. And so our 809 is almost half of what the actual market is charging for 1-bedroom apartments right now. The 2-bedroom apartments were closer to market rate on those at the $1,350 and $1,450. But there again, the actual current median rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Waterloo region, $1,810. And so those are the rents were rolling right from $497 at the lowest level for the 1-bedrooms up to $1,810, which provides a mix of housing for a larger range of people as well. And this is all in compliance with what the region wants within the building. So how do people qualify? Well, Menno Homes has always used the region of Waterloo's income test for our buildings, and that will carry on here. So for a 1-bedroom unit, the maximum household income would be $54,432, and for a 2-bedroom, $65,088. The region defines affordable housing as somebody not spending more than 30% of their gross household income on shelter. These are the high numbers. And so even the $1,450 a month for the 2-bedroom units falls under this $65,000 a month. But the $54,000, quite frankly, most of the people that we provide housing to would have incomes under $30,000 a year. And quite a number, the majority, actually have incomes below the low income cutoff line, which I believe right now is around $23,000 a year. And so although you might look at this and go, well, that's not affordable housing. The reality is that the majority of the people that call a Menno Homes apartment building their home are living below the low income cutoff line, what used to be referred to as the poverty line. So how are we going to make all that happen? And you might look and recognize a couple of people in here. This is the coffee group that gets together every morning and solves all the world's problems at Sprucelawn. I think there's a few of these, so they've got lots of problems to solve, and they seem to keep doing it. We've got a capital campaign brochure. It's been printed off. If I'd been thinking, I would have made sure there were some copies in church for you this morning. So I'll make sure to get Kevin some for the foyer, and we can slip them into your mailboxes for next week. But we do have a brochure that explains a lot of the information that I've provided for you, and the fact that this will require a $2 million capital campaign as well. And so we've got significant dollars from the federal, provincial governments, from the region, from the municipalities. If you add all of that up, it comes to $3.4 million. We have an application in the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for an additional $900,000 grant, plus some long-term debt financing as well. I'm keeping really close attention these days to the 10-year bond yield, because that's what our interest rate on our long-term mortgage will be. And so with the direction that interest rates are going right now, it makes me a little bit nervous every night, but we're going to work through that. Right now, we're estimating that we're going to be able to carry around a $4.5 million mortgage, and that's by achieving a $2 million capital campaign as well. So it takes a lot of pieces to come together to make a project like this possible, but it's only by having paid off a lot of the capital that we can actually then provide rents for people at $497 a month at the lowest number. It just, that's the way the numbers work. So there's a lot of fundraising involved. Certainly talk to Laverne, look at the information on the campaign site, or feel free to contact me directly as well. But one of the ways St. Jacobs has supported the work of Menno Homes for quite a number of years has been through our bike-a-thon. And here's a picture again of the Oscars from last year. They'll be biking again this year. The actual date of our bike-a-thon is June the 11th, but we're extending it out over the weekend because the last couple of years we've had virtual events, and people have biked when it worked for them. And we've actually had really good events on all those years. If it rains on the Saturday, people bike on the Sunday. And so we're excited about having that kind of as our anchor weekend. And I'm sure the Oscars have been involved at St. Jacobs, already starting to raise a bit of awareness of this. And so when they come around, just remember that those donations go directly to capital for the construction of that project that's going to be happening right around the corner from you. So that's kind of the update on the project itself. And we are going to leave a spot for some questions at the end. But before we jump to that, I also wanted to talk a wee bit about our brand update. And for those of you who were able to attend the annual general meeting that we had in January, this will be a bit of going over that again, maybe a bit of a refresh for you, but I have tried to condense it down so it's not quite as long as it was. There's a lot more information during that. And this shot here, some of you might recognize. I've used it before because it's just such a great picture of Martin Buer on the right-hand side there, who started Mental Homes back in 2001, and Rick Koberbaum, now Executive Director of MCC Canada, in the middle, who helped encourage Martin to become involved in the early 2000s and create Mental Homes as a project of Mennonite churches in Waterloo Region who wanted to do something around affordable housing, because just like now, affordable housing was in the news every day. So if we go back to 2001, there was a 10th anniversary booklet put out in 2011, and Martin made the comment in that booklet. He says, in the spring of 2001, the question arose as to what we would call this fledgling new organization. And Martin suggested the name Mental Homes. And he said the decision was made that this would be a good name to get started, and it could always be changed later. And so here's my lovely little chair that I like to talk about. That story, it can always be changed later, reminds me a little bit of how it works when you're arranging furniture in a new home. Sometimes on the way back out of the moving truck, a chair will end up in the corner of a house because it's the most convenient spot for it at the time. And then 10 years later, it's still in that location. It can always be changed later, sometimes has a way of not being changed at all, unless you stop back and take a moment and reflect. So I will come back to this idea of the chair as we go through this presentation. Mental Homes did make some tweaks to our logo over the intervening 20 years, but our focus has always remained the same: affordable housing for households with low incomes in Waterloo Region. And our board has also changed and adapted over the years, from meeting in church basements and borrowed space to, over the last couple of years, meeting by Zoom. But our values have not changed. And like most value statements, I'll admit that sometimes these are things that we are only striving for. We don't always hit the mark. And when we fall short, it hurts. But I can also say that when we're considering something new or reflecting on how things are currently done, we do come back to these values to help guide our decision making. And I think Brian and Laverne can both attest to the fact that we had some decisions to make this week around what was the right thing to do. And ultimately we said, okay, it's going to cost a little bit more money to do it this way, but that's the right thing to do. And values are only truly your values if you do them, even when they sometimes cost you some money. And so we have a good understanding of who we are and who we want to be. And the various boards over the years have reflected on whether it was the right time to, figuratively speaking, move the chair. So in March of 2019, the board decided that if nothing else, we should undertake a review. And so we started on this winding journey. We had focus groups, we had broader community surveys. Some respondents questioned what was prompting the change, and others wondered why it had taken so long. And that's the tricky part of having a strong brand. The brand is not a name and it's not a logo. It's what people imagine you to be. And when people say they like Mental Homes, they're often saying there's a positive association between our name and what we do. And ultimately, what's most important is what we do. Now, for those of us with an ethnic Mennonite heritage, potentially changing a name that has a strong link to our personal identity comes with a sense of loss. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge that, because I share that as well. But then I started thinking about the Canadian Food Grains Bank. In 1975, the Mennonite Food Bank was born under the umbrella of MCC Canada. And from 75 to 83, mostly Mennonite farmers donated thousands of tons of grain that was shipped to dozens of countries across Africa and Asia. The Mennonite Food Bank became a success, and other churches observed what was happening and they wanted to be involved. In 1983, the Mennonite Food Bank was dissolved and it was replaced with the Canadian Food Grains Bank. For me, this is an important example of how sharing a success with the larger community can have an even greater impact. Could the positive impact of mental homes also be amplified? Might a new name more clearly communicate who we are and what we do? Would that strengthen our response to the need for affordable housing? The decision was made that it was the right time to move the chair. And here the life story of the caterpillar and the butterfly helps, for me at least, to illustrate this journey. A caterpillar has genes that can produce wings. It's just that in the early stages, they haven't been switched on. The DNA, or in our case, the values and the mission haven't changed. So we started to get to work on our recipe for our new name. We had a long list of 242 names, and we sifted that down multiple times to a narrowed down list of 5 names for serious consideration. We didn't just want another way of saying mental homes. We wanted a name that was aspirational, that might stand as its own mission statement, and that might also spark curiosity. And as we reviewed the various pieces of feedback, some themes also developed. Theme ingredients included sustainability, how our business model works to ensure that we are operationally sustainable well into the future, how we go beyond the building code requirements for energy efficiency, how we provide more accessible units than the minimum requirements, how we include the supports for our tenants of a community support worker or a community nurse, the case of Sprucelawn, the Tender Loving Care Committee, how with donor support, we provide additional rental units at below average market rent, more than what would be required to or would be allowed to if we relied strictly on government funding. And how partnerships allow us to do even more. The overriding theme was that while affordable housing was the starting point, if we really wanted to create an environment where people can thrive, we need to go beyond simply providing housing. And with that, we realized a potential new name had always been part of what we strived to do. We want to go beyond housing and create a place to call home. And we liked how the name implies movement and activity. We aren't standing still. And it obviously picks up on the themes of doing more than basic housing. And I want to emphasize here, though, that housing is at the core of what we do. We are not branching off to provide other social services. Our mission remains housing. And we also recognize that the best housing is more than 4 walls and cheap rent. And we also liked how the name might prompt a question that would create the opportunity for us to share why we believe it's important to go beyond simply providing housing. And while we announced the name at our AGM in January, we're still a few months away from making that change official. And even when it becomes official, we know it will take some time before you think of beyond housing before mental homes. And that's okay. The chair has been in the same spot for quite a number of years. It has been solid and dependable, and it will continue to provide the same good service for many years to come, just with a slightly different look. And so with that, I'm going to stop my PowerPoint presentation. I think that brings both Laverne and I to the end of what we had hoped to share. And I suspect there might be some time for questions as well, Kevin. So I'll turn it back over to you. Can't hear you, Kevin.
Yeah, there's always that. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Laverne, for sharing this update and this Sprucelawn story with us. And there's just so much to marvel at in what has gone into this project, the expansion project, but also the cooperation project with Menno Homes. And we've gotten just a little taste of the hours and the effort that has gone into this on a number of fronts. So we do want to take some time for comments or questions. We hope that you've been able to actually catch a glimpse of the excitement that's building here. I don't know how many of us have had a chance to walk past the site there where Sprucelawn is. It's just around the corner from our place, and so we walk past it regularly. the Carpenter House is down, and suddenly that site is open, and you can imagine this building being there, and you can imagine the relocated parking lot in a way that before that it was just really hard to actually, how is this going to work there? And suddenly this site is happening, and this building is, you can kind of see it beginning to emerge already. So it's very exciting, and I hope you've caught a little bit of that excitement here, and also just the opportunities for affordable housing in St. Jacobs, which is such a desperately needed thing. So if you have a question, please feel free to unmute and kind of pop in, maybe offer your name so we know who you are, and just give me a moment once you've said your name so I can find you and add you to this screen, spotlighted screen here at the front, so everyone can see who you are as you ask your question. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute and speak up.
Well, Laverne, I think we hit all the right spots.
We must have, I guess.
No, as any good teacher knows, you just have to wait for students out.
Blessed is he who waits, eh?
Yeah.
Questions or comments or affirmations for what you've seen today, all would be.
It was a lot of information all at once, I know that. So which is why we will make sure we get that brochure into the church.
Hi, it's Marcia.
Okay, let me just find you here and I'll add you. Okay, go ahead, Marcia.
Well, it was a pretty quiet group of 41 screens that I hear or see here. So I just wanted to offer my affirmations to all the work that has gone into getting this expansion project to where it is. So kudos and thumbs up to all involved, present and past. And I would add that it was, my mother is online, my parents, and mom was St. Jacob's Mennonite Church secretary at the time that I believe the Sprucelawn, the original Sprucelawn, was being built, and Richard Yorty was our pastor. And so mom has often commented that the original building plans that she would have heard Richard speak of did not include an elevator. And I was the one who emailed the group tonight, and it was Jean Hackburn who insisted that this building for seniors have an elevator. So think about that 40 years later. Would you build a 2-3-story apartment building without an elevator? So kudos to Jean for that foresight.
Amen.
Thanks, Marcia. Doug, I think you have your hand up. Can I add you next?
Yes, you can.
All right, go ahead.
Hi, Doug Shantz here. Thanks, Laverne, and thanks, Dan, for the update on what's happening at Sprucelawn. I've heard about, well, my grandmother was a resident at Sprucelawn many, many years ago. I don't know if she was one of the originals, but she spent time there. And at that point, I was kind of a young guy, but I was impressed with Sprucelawn at that point. And from what you're proposing, it will continue to be a lovely place to live. I've had a little bit to do with Dan around the church house. But from observation, I've always been impressed with mental homes and how they function. And Laverne has kind of kept me up to date with how things have gone with the expansion of Sprucelawn. And the fact is, it seems like mental homes knows how to get things done. The Sprucelawn board, I have to commend for hanging in there, because the frustrating part to me in this story is what hoops they had to go through from the local municipalities, whoever that may be, and the rules they had to follow to make it happen, and how much that cost when we talk about affordable housing. The other side of it is the governments are coming through with some dollars to subsidize these houses. I'm involved with Parkwood Mennonite Homes, and they are going to put up a building around the same time as Sprucelawn, and it will have affordable units, and the government is kicking in there to help too. So they are putting their money where their mouth is, a need for affordable housing for seniors. So there are good things happening in our region on that account. So thanks to everyone who's part of it.
Thank you.
Brian and Sandy, can I add you next?
Sure, thanks. I didn't want to let Dan get off so easy without a question. There have been some great comments, and affordable housing is certainly something that we need more of. But I'm wondering, Dan, how many actual units does Menno Homes manage? You said the number of buildings, but how many homes, how many?
Yeah. So yeah, maybe I wasn't clear when I started then. So we have 230. So if you like the Foundry, for example, is one location, but we have 25 units in there in Elmira. So throughout all of Waterloo region now, with the addition of Sprucelawn, the 30 that we have, and the one at St. Jacob's Mennonite Church as well, then, which we don't own but have a lease agreement with, that gives us 230 households that would call it either a house or an apartment, their home, and then with the addition of the 28, that'll put us up to 258. So it actually, I had run some numbers, and I'm not, I don't have a specific, oh, we want to grow big and be all, you just kind of do what's in front of you next. But we've actually, as a charity that does affordable housing in Waterloo region, we're actually the largest now. There's other housing providers, nonprofits, but registered charities, yeah, we've grown through these sorts of partnerships. So it's been wonderful to be able to be part of that.
The partnerships are great. Thanks for that. If you said that at the beginning, I missed it. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Just out of curiosity, some of the other, the Foundry you mentioned is fewer units than Sprucelawn is currently. When Sprucelawn is completed, the expansion, will that be the largest building in terms of units? That
it will be, yeah. Like the Rockway Gardens, which was our first major apartment building, it's a 50-unit seniors building right at Rockway Gardens Village, right across from Rockway Gardens. The Waterloo Mennonite Homes that we amalgamated with a year ago, that's 46 units. The recent building in Kitchener is 48. So here at 58, it'll actually be our largest single site location. Yeah.
Okay.
Squeezed into probably one of the smallest footprints as well.
Any other questions or comments for Dan and for Laverne?
Nelson Shifley here.
All right, let me add you. Go ahead.
Yes, let me add my compliments to all of the work that you gentlemen and your boards have been doing. I have a question, Dan. You had mentioned, and I've heard you share this data before, just in terms of what the wait lists are for affordable housing. And I'm curious if these units are ready by next summer or spring or whenever, how do you begin to assess and make the decisions as to who gets in? You must have some criteria. Part of it will be income, I know, but what are the other criteria that those must be excruciating decisions that have to be made by someone?
Yeah, it's not by someone, because that's not a decision you want to make by yourself, right?
No.
So yeah, we do end up putting a group of people together to help with that. And you're absolutely correct. Those are hard days. Those are hard meetings, because you realize that you actually are in a position of making decisions that have life-changing impacts, not only for the people that you provide the housing for, but also for the ones you unfortunately have to say no to. I do remember our experience in Elmira, making those phone calls to people to let them know that their application had not been accepted. And by and large, everyone was just profoundly, I don't know, grateful for the opportunity. And yeah, it was what I thought they were not easy phone calls, but everyone understood the situation. So when Menno Homes got started in 2001, there were 3,000 households on the waiting list. Up until about 2017, that number had stayed fairly stagnant at around 3,000. So people would leave, new housing would get added, all that sort of stuff. And since 2017, with the rise in real estate, with investment firms buying up housing, all those things coming together, we're up at over 6,000 right now. I think it's approaching 6,500 households on the waiting list throughout Waterloo Region. The most recent census data from last year is just being tabulated now. So we've got some early numbers on rents and things like that. I haven't seen the actual details on, Woolwich Township, for example, on some of the stats. So some of the numbers I'm referring to in the brochure go back to the last census data, where that was 2016. But in 2016, so here's a couple of examples for you. In 2016, in Woolwich Township, 35% of those living in unaffordable housing were seniors. Right? So if somebody lived in unaffordable housing, there's a 1 in 3 chance in Woolwich Township they were a senior citizen. And another one that just always jumps out at me is, so if we look at seniors and then senior single women. So in 2016, and we know this number will not have gotten better, 55.7% of all single senior women who were renting lived in unaffordable housing, spending more than 30% of their income on their housing. So if you want to look at areas where we're trying to focus, I think there's a real need for seniors. The majority of Menno Homes housing is actually for seniors, although we're not exclusively doing seniors housing, but it's a need that's very urgent, and it goes hidden because in the paper, we see the stories in the news about homeless encampments and whatnot. And those, I don't want to diminish that or minimize it, but they make the paper, and frankly, the majority of the people that we're trying to help don't make the paper, but their needs are just as urgent.
Just to focus my question a little bit further, Dan, and Laverne, whoever, but with Sprucelawn, will one of the choice criteria be where people are currently living or from? In other words, St. Jacobs or Woolwich Township, or what is the geographical spread from which you can draw?
Yeah, our focus is on Woolwich Township.
Okay.
Right. Now at the beginning, you'll remember I said we have to take a certain number of people off the Region of Waterloo's waiting list. So we have less control over the people that are coming to us off the Region of Waterloo's waiting list. But even in the past, we have been able to work with the region to kind of help with some flexibility around that. So we certainly always look at somebody's current housing position. The 2-bedroom units are closer to market. And so, that'll be, it's not going to be people coming off the Region of Waterloo's waiting list that are applying for those houses, right? Or those apartment buildings. So our focus will be for Woolwich. People have to specifically mention that. In the Foundry in Elmira, we were able to work quite effectively with the region to make sure that everyone who moved in that building had been from Woolwich Township.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, this rounds us to a very clean hour. Well done. Presentation and questions, and it's 8 o'clock. So another big thank you to Dan and to Laverne. Maybe a final question, and this I'm not sure if is better for Laverne in terms of the project now and the fundraising to it. You have identified that there is a fundraising goal here as part of the total capital that's being put together. How do we connect in with that fundraising project?
Well, maybe I'll start. There'll be mailings going out. Dan said we'll get brochures at our church. You might get a phone call from Dan or myself for a little visit, and this for you to consider what you might want to contribute towards this. But if you feel led to do it on your own, that would be great, because to raise $2 million is not an easy task. And whatever help we can get from you would be appreciated. Dan has a lot more experience in this than I have, but we have, I know the people in St. Jacobs at our church and in our community better than Dan does in some cases, and we'll work together on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big number, right? And Laverne knows that. And we've got a list of people who've supported our projects in the past. And we think based on that, it's a reasonable target. It's certainly one that we have to hit. And so for folks to make a commitment over multiple years is perfectly acceptable. If you've already made your mind up around what your plans are for this year for your giving, even a note to us saying, we can't do anything this year, or maybe a little bit this year, more next year. Those sorts of things all help to come together to make the whole thing work. And large gifts and small gifts, I always liken it to the bricks on the side of a big building, right? It's a lot of bricks, but if one's missing, you notice it. And so every donation makes a difference, whether it's a small brick or a big section of bricks.
All right, thanks very much for that update, and a big thanks. And we want to kind of offer our blessing and the grace of God go with you as you continue in this exciting project, and together with the other partners and the other folks who are around you. I know it's not just Dan and Laverne who are carrying this forward now. There's a larger community around you as you do this work, but you're carrying a lot of the leadership right now, and we're so grateful for that as we see this project take shape. So thanks very much to you two, and thanks to everybody for coming and listening, asking your questions, becoming engaged in this important community work. And blessings to you also in your evening and the week ahead.
Yeah,
take care.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
If you'd like, you can unmute and offer some parting well wishes.
Parting shots.
Parting shots, yeah.
Thanks for the plug on the Oscars, Dan.
Yeah.
Anybody want to cycle with us? You're welcome. We'll probably go on June 11th, the Saturday, but we'll see how that works. And yes, some
we're
folks
hoping to have we should have the site up this week, Brent, so that people can link to it and sponsor and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, and like you said, people have been asked already, so
yeah. We
always get good support. It's good.
I love talking about the Oscars just because it's a great name, first of all. But I mean, it does. Yeah, it's really cool. It was always a really great part. I mean, the ride has changed over the years. It used to have the motorcycle component. The last 2 years have been virtual, so we've adapted. But I think it's been a big part of it to say, yeah, we have this really committed group of people that really cycle, and they go a long ways. And everyone's always excited when you come back. So that's always been fun.
Yeah. See you then.
All right, we'll see you. I'm going to sign out.
Take care, Dan. All right, nice to see everybody. Have a good evening, and I'll close the meeting from this end. Good night.